Candidates rarely make their announcements in the evening, but Marco Rubio did. He came here at the precise time of 6:03 p.m. to make sure that cable networks like the conservative home of Fox News would carry it live for a friendly audience.
But he's up against some pretty established names here, announcing hours after Hillary Clinton. So bottom line, George, what's he really up against here?
Well, look, he's up against fame. There's no question about that. He's up against fortune. Both those candidates, both Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush, are going to have a lot more money than Marco Rubio. They also have more experience, bigger organizations. And Rubio starts out this campaign really in the middle of the GOP path.
All right, so maybe he should just give up. Joining us now is Tim Graham, Director of Media Analysis and Media at the Media Research Center and Executive Editor of Newsbusters.org. Hello, Tim.
Hello.
All right, so I mean, I could play many more examples of how the media has reacted. Mika, and we'll get to, I will play Mika in a little while, but overall, how is Mr. Rubio been treated by the mainstream media?
Well, there's been a few positive things here and there. You know, after the interview on NBC yesterday, Matt Lauer said, well, that guy's got some appeal. But I think the general rap on him is he's too young. He doesn't have enough experience. He, as you heard in the clip, he doesn't have enough money. They're going to say those sorts of things. And I suppose that's fair. But I think what's amazing here is that all of these Republican candidates are announcing, they're granting interviews to the networks. Hillary Clinton doesn't have to do that. You know, this is where you can see that she gets to do whatever she wants. She doesn't have to have a press conference. She doesn't have to grant an interview to the networks. They have the networks following her around with cameras to say, oh, look, she's had a burrito.
Yeah, and as you and I talked about a second ago before we went on, you know, when Hillary announces, and you pointed out there is a story that broke today and we should talk about it, but for the most part, she announces and all the scandals and all the baggage goes away. It's just, oh my God, look how she did it. Look what she's doing. She's in a van. Look where she's going. Look who she's talking to. Look what her listening. But when the Republican candidates announce, it's boom, like Jake Tapper said to Rubio, you know, you talk about the candidates of yesterday. You're the candidate of yesterday on gay marriage. You had Wolf Blitzer going after him on something else. So they all try to bring up the negatives once the Republican candidate announces. But for Hillary, the negatives go away when she announces.
Yeah, I think that has been the case. I was really stunned in the early stories. We were waiting for how much space would the email scandal get, and it was barely mentioned, if at all, until this morning. And even this morning, they're trying to minimize the stories about her emails.
Well, and you should talk about it. The New York Times came out with a story about Hillary back in December of 2012, was asked by congressional investigators about the use of her email, and she just didn't answer.
Yes, she declined to answer. Now, remember, at this time, Steve, this is when she was giving these syrupy interviews to 60 Minutes. She and Barack sat next to each other with Steve Croft. You know, he just somehow never asked any tough questions.
Yeah.
He had one Benghazi question. It was just like, you know, how you doing? And so, I mean, I think this is the whole issue that conservatives have, is that there is an inherent unfairness in our campaign process, that everyone expects that the Republican nominees are going to go get interviewed by somebody like George Stephanopoulos, who worked for Hillary for years. And, you know, Hillary doesn't have to grant any interviews. She doesn't have to have any press conferences. Right. And I just think on some level that ought to be seen for what it is. That is diva-like behavior. You can't say she's not trying to be coronated when she feels she doesn't have to lower herself to journalists.
Absolutely, and this whole crazy tour, or as Bill Kristol called it yesterday, you know, the meeting with the peasants tour, is just another way of avoiding the press. Now, we don't have time to play this, but I do want to ask you about it. Mika Brzezinski, and I did a Give Me Five on this, Morning Joe, talking about Marco Rubio, saying that Hillary would eat his lunch, and there's a woman, there's an accomplished woman, and there's a boy. She called Marco Rubio, I don't know the racial ramifications of calling a Hispanic boy. I know she didn't mean anything racial, but nonetheless, if it were a black man, it would have meaning. How did she get away with this?
Well, it's especially outrageous considering, yes, if you flipped it over and somebody said, you know, a Democratic candidate's just a girl. If you had tried to say Hillary was just a girl,
right,
when she ran for anything, the Senate in 2000. If you
forget
said
it. Forget
just
it.
girl,
Yeah.
they would have all had a fit. Remember, they all had a fit when somebody showed up with a sign that said, "Iron my shirt."
Yeah, I remember that. And, of course, when Lazio walked across the stage. Tim, keep up the great work, and we'll keep going to newsbusters.org. Thank you, sir. Tim Graham, ladies and gentlemen. All right, up next, the director of Judicial Watch's investigations, Chris Farrell. But first, we're bringing back the viewer call-in segment to the Steve Malzberg Show. And if you love the show or just have a content question and want to weigh in, here's what you do. You email us at callsteve@newsmax.com. Call Steve at newsmax.com, and we'll be in touch with you.